Welcome to another 6x9 Storyteller episode. Please subscribe and give me a like and share my video if you're enjoying them. Now, let's begin with today's stories. Ex and boyfriend hurt my daughter, tarnish my friend's reputation, and I seek revenge. To start off, this is a throwaway as I don't want it to tie back to me. Also, buckle up, this is going to be a long ride. These events took place over several years. I hope it is worth the read. I am going to begin with the main players: me, my ex-wife Pepper, revenge target number 1, her boyfriend Steve, revenge target number 2, the boyfriend's ex-wife Maria, co-partner in the revenge, my daughter Sarah, and my friend Jason, accomplice in the revenge. With that said, let's get some backstory out of the way. So, Pepper and I had a very up and down marriage. It was one of those that I was madly in love with her, but looking back I think she was in it more for the money and convenience. She had one son we will call Drug, because he was and still is a major drug addict, before we got married, and I also had one son, name is unimportant, that I had full custody of. While married we had Sarah. I toughed the marriage out for as long as I could, but eventually, we just couldn't keep it together. We separated, and due to traveling some for work and having custody of my son, I moved back to my hometown a few states away so my parents could help, but kept an apartment in the town that Pepper and Sarah lived in so that I could still spend as much time with my daughter as I could. At this time, I asked my best friend Jason, who is a lawyer and owns his own firm, to do up a child support agreement for us. It is very important to note that we only addressed child support, it had nothing about custody or visitation or anything else in it. So, for about a year this was how it would work. I would spend a month with Sarah while my parents watched my other son, then I would spend a month with my son. Almost exactly a year later I could no longer afford keeping two households, and Pepper was wanting to move back to her hometown, which was in a different state but closer to where I lived, so I gave up the apartment and she moved. The new situation continued for a couple more years. Pepper and I remained friendly and even tried to reconcile the relationship a couple of times, but it wouldn't work out. I was still deeply in love with her, but we couldn't come to an agreement on things like where to live and such. I forced myself to try and move on and started dating. She had been dating basically from the day after I moved out. Even though I still loved her, our relationship moved more into good friends than husband and wife. So, she finally meets Steve. I never was told much about Steve other than he was a certified ethical hacker and that is what he did for employment, important later. While they were dating, she would send me texts about their dates. She even texted me the day they first had sex together. This hurt deeply, and looking back I think this is what she wanted, but I tried to play the part of good friend and confidant. Steve and Pepper had been dating for 6 months when out of the blue she tells me they broke up and she realized that she is madly in love with me. Since it's at the beginning of summer, she packs some suitcases and heads to my state. They were going to spend the summer with me and see if they like it or not. We had an amazing summer. All the kids are getting along. Drug even loved it here, so she makes it official, we are back together, and they are moving in. We went and registered my daughter for school, we even were able to get her on a Pee Wee cheerleading team for the summer. She made several friends and was loving being here. There was only one problem: Pepper still had an apartment that had all her furniture and stuff in it. I offered to go up with my truck and help load everything, but she insisted that her and Drug can get it done. So off they go to pack up and then head to their new home. As you can guess, things didn't go as planned. She was home for about 3 days when she informs me that under no circumstance will she move and that her and Steve are in love and are moving in with each other. To say I was destroyed was an understatement. I couldn't understand why she had done it. The worst part was she left it to me to tell Sarah the bad news. When I told her, the devastated look on her face started turning my feelings of hurt into feelings of anger. Then Sarah broke down and started begging to stay with me and started spilling the beans. She told me things about how her mom would leave with Steve for days and leave Drug in charge. She had to learn how to cook for herself at 8 because Drug would spend the money on drugs and spend the whole time high. If Drug wasn't left in charge, Pepper would use her multiple convicted felon niece to watch her. She also told me about the first time that she had met Steve. He came to their house, basically said hello, and him and her mom disappeared into the bedroom and started having loud sex. Sarah was outside the door bawling and they just ignored and continued. This is how my 8-year learned of sex, and she is still in counseling trying to recover 7 years later. At this point my anger has turned to rage. I immediately notified Pepper that there was no way Sarah was coming back and I would fight her to the death to keep her out of that situation. Pepper responded by getting an emergency hearing in her state to force Sarah back. I had to scramble, but I managed to get a lawyer and easily won the hearing, which Pepper showed up late for and told the judge it was due to a disability. The judge agreed that since there was no custody agreement and with the troubling accusations that I had gathered, it was best for now for Sarah to stay with me. I had won the first battle, but it was short-lived. Within an hour of the hearing, I started getting tons of phishing emails and texts, I was also getting password resets and MFA codes from my bank, Facebook, Reddit, and any other accounts. I knew that Steve was behind it. The very next day Jason calls. His law firm's website, email, and phone account had been hacked. Because he had to disclose the hack to the court and because he was working on a semi-high profile case at the time the FBI got involved. To say I was enraged was an understatement. These two people had destroyed me, harmed my daughter, and tarnished the reputation of my lifelong friend. It was time for them to pay and pay dearly. I was a man on a mission. I spent hours digging up as much dirt as I could on Stephen and Pepper. I had a lot of luck with Pepper. I found social media posts of her out late drinking that correlated to tardiness and missed days at school for Sarah. I found tons of pics of her and two strange kids doing fun activities. I found neighbors that were willing to testify that Sarah had to come beg for food because she was left with either drug or the felon. I knew I could bury her. Steve on the other had all his accounts locked down. I couldn't find any dirt and it was driving me crazy. Then it hit me: try LinkedIn. It paid off. There wasn't much posted, but through his account I found Maria, his ex-wife's account. I reached out to her, and she happily accepted. Maria and I became fast friends. She hated Pepper, for good reason, as they had both abandoned her kids like my daughter, and didn't want her around her kids. I learned so much. To keep it short, Maria and Steve had recently divorced. As part of the custody agreement, Steve got the house, car, bank account, savings, and a lower than usual child support. Maria had traded all that money to have control of the kids. She knew he was a scumbag and all she was concerned about was keeping her kids safe. They had a very detailed custody agreement with rules for Steve to follow. As part of that agreement, if Steve broke any rules, then he had to pay and pay dearly. He had to sell the house and give her half of everything. His child support would also double, and Steve would be financially ruined. Steve also didn't have her blocked on the social media and would regularly send texts bragging about how great his life was without her. Many of those texts had pictures of Pepper in them. We compared notes, we swapped evidence, we came up with a plan. And now it is time for revenge. First, I got with Jason. He let the FBI investigator know that I had also had some hacking attempts and we believed it was the same person. The investigator called quick. I gave him all the information I had and who I believed was doing it, and he asked a weird question. Do I know where Steve worked? Well, yes, I did, thanks to Maria. So apparently Steve wasn't as good as a hacker as he thought himself to be. They had already traced back the hack on Jason to a business. The very same business Steve worked for. As soon as my conversation with the FBI was done, I called his work to lodge a complaint. I told the manager that someone was trying to hack me, and I was sure it was Steve. They, of course, did not take it too seriously because I had no proof. What they didn't know was they were soon going to be getting a visit from a special agent. The next week was absolute hell for Steve and Pepper. Pepper got served with the divorce papers and her lawyer got served with all the evidence I had gathered. My lawyer said it was the most complete investigation he had ever seen. I had all 40 tardiness and 19 absences tied to nights out drinking with Steve. I had hard proof of them abandoning my daughter for days at a time. Maria even gave me a picture that was taken at 2 a.m. the night before the emergency hearing with Steve and Pepper dinking in a tattoo parlor. The same hearing, she was late to and said it was due to a disability. Steve got served that he had violated the entire custody agreement. Maria had pictures from me proving he was with Pepper on nights the kids were with him, and they were left alone. She also had proof that there was contact with Pepper that violated the custody agreement. The fallout was awesome to watch. Steve was fired. Between my complaint, another older complaint of him hacking, and the FBI showing up, they had no choice but to fire him. He did avoid any legal issues as the FBI could never tie it directly to him. The word spread of why he was fired, and no one would hire him in an IT job again. He had to sell the house, liquidate all the investments and bank accounts and give half to Maria. His child support got to stay the same since he no longer had a source of income. Last I heard, he was working at a grocery store. So in total his income went from $200K plus a year to less than $40K. As for Pepper, the divorce was swift and painful for her. The judge ruled in my favor for all counts. I got sole custody and sole decision making. She was forced to go to counseling and her and drug can only visit Sarah with a third-party supervisor paid for by Pepper. Sarah is doing much better. She still needs counseling, but she thrives in school and has many friends. She very rarely sees her mom, but she is much better off without her.